Hello everybody, I'm Kat, and I've read a lot of books recently. April was a really crazy reading month for me. I read like 7 books. I haven't had a good reading month in like over a year. I'm really excited about this one. And actually, a lot of the books that I read this month I don't own physical copies of. I checked them out at the library, so I only actually own 3 of the books I read this month. Let's get into it. So the first book I read was Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. This was a reread, and I of course gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I'm like 100% sure you already know what this book is about, so I'm not going to launch into the explanation of it because y'all already know what it's about. None of my thoughts have really changed since reading it the first time. I will say that I had a different reading experience this time. I really enjoyed revisiting Simon and all of his friends, especially with Leon the Offbeat now being out, which I am currently reading, so you will see a review for that once I finish it. There were also a ton of details that I completely forgot about, and it was so much fun revisiting them because I forgot about them, and when I reread it, it was such a surprise. I'm like, oh, I forgot that this happened. I adore this book so much. I love the movie adaptation. It's probably my favorite book to movie adaptation. As of right now, it's so faithful to the book. So if you have read the book but haven't seen the movie, you should see the movie. The next book I read was Still Here by Rowan Blanchard. This book is essentially just a bunch of Rowan's diary entries that she published. There are also some works mixed in with some of her favorite photographers and poets, and that's basically what this book is. I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. This novel was very powerful. I really loved the diary entry format of it, but I also had quite a few issues with this book. Some of the entries had really small handwriting, so I'd have to like hold the book like this close to my face to like try and figure out what it was saying. I also wasn't a huge fan of the poetry in this novel. I didn't fully understand the metaphors that kept popping up throughout the poetry, and I just didn't enjoy reading it that much. Overall, I'd say I liked this book. I'm gonna have so much fun editing this later. The next book I read was The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. This is Rupi Kaur's newest poetry anthology, and it kind of deals with her grief and like self-discovery. Honestly, this book read like a Taylor Swift song. Like, there's no other description I can use to like describe it, but the whole time while I was reading it, I'm like, this reminds me of a Taylor Swift song. It dealt with breakups, loss, grief, and self-empowerment so well, and I'm really glad I read this poetry book because I think it has some great messages behind some of the poems. I don't plan on reading Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur just because I've heard some pretty meh things about it, but I've heard really great things about this one, and I did really enjoy it, and I ended up giving The Sun and Her Flowers 4 stars. The next book I read was The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. This book follows this boy named Charlie throughout his first year of high school, and it's told through these letters that he's writing this friend. That's pretty much the whole premise of the book. I gave this book 3.5 stars. It really wasn't what I was expecting at all. I was kind of expecting it to be more lighthearted, you know, perks of being a wallflower, but it was a complete 180 from what I thought it was gonna be. I will say it is a very powerful novel despite what my original predictions were. I absolutely loved Patrick. He was my favorite character in this entire novel. I loved him so much. Charlie was okay, but it was a little much being stuck in his head the whole time. I would have to sometimes just read like a couple letters and then put the book down and like walk away from it because it would be a little too much sometimes reading it. Honestly, there wasn't anything special about Sam. She was just your classic manic pixie dream girl. She was extremely 2D, and she really suffered from not being developed enough because she could have been such a great character, but she was just severely underdeveloped. The main issue I had with this book was the plot. More like the lack of it. There wasn't anything that we kept leading up to. There wasn't anything that wanted to keep me reading besides Patrick. Just following Charlie around during his freshman year of high school wasn't entertaining enough for me, and I debated multiple times putting this book down, partly because of the plot and partly because I didn't like reading from Charlie's point of view. I absolutely adored the writing style though. It was so beautiful. I loved it so much. It really just wasn't what I expected, but I mean, I guess I am glad that I read it. The next book I read was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This book follows 2 sisters during the early 1800s as they deal with the ups and downs of finding love at this time. I gave Sense and Sensibility 3 out of 5 stars. It was just okay. I liked the writing, though there were times where it was a little much and the descriptions would kind of go on and I'd be like, we're still describing this thing. I also really liked some of the characters. I really liked Eleanor and Colonel Brandon. I liked Marianne just because she was extremely melodramatic, but there were a ton of side characters that I just couldn't keep track of. Like, they would like pop up and disappear out of nowhere and then they'd pop up again and I'd be like, who are you again? I don't know you. That's why I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I'm excited though to read Jane Austen's other works because this was her very first novel, and usually an author's first novel is their weakest. I'm really excited to see what I'll think of her other works because I think I will like them a lot more. The next book I read was Not If I Save You First by Ali Carter. I gave this book 4.5 stars. This book follows this girl named Maddie and this boy named Logan, and Maddie is the daughter of a Secret Service agent and Logan is the son of the President of the United States. When they were around 10 years old, they were inseparable, they were best friends. But then an event happens that causes Maddie's dad to want him and Maddie to move to Alaska in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. 6 years pass by, and out of nowhere, Logan appears at this cabin, and Maddie desperately wants to kill him. Reading this book just reminded me of how much I just love Ali Carter and her books. Her writing style, her characters, like, there's nothing I didn't like about this book, really. Like, to be honest, there's literally nothing I didn't like about it. The only issue I had this book that made me give it a 4.5 instead of 5 stars was Maddie's inner monologue sometimes got pretty annoying at points. It didn't stop me from enjoying this novel. There were a few moments where I was like, really, Maddie? Really? But otherwise, I absolutely adored this book. If you haven't read any of Ali Carter's books, I highly recommend them. This one is a standalone. I actually went to a signing for this book, so this edition is signed to me. And the last book I'm going to talk about today is Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. This book follows this girl named Alice, and Alice is biromantic asexual, but her girlfriend doesn't know that she is asexual, so once Alice tries to communicate this to her girlfriend decides to break up with her, and that's where like the book takes off. I don't really want to tell you more. I gave this book 2 stars. I'm really sad that I gave it 2 stars because I really wanted to like it because I heard from multiple people that this book is absolutely adorable and it's so cute, but I just didn't like it. I couldn't connect to the writing at all, and I couldn't connect to the characters either. The characters weren't relatable at all, and there wasn't anything about them that would make them relatable. I couldn't stand Alice's parents. They were horrible. They were the worst, and her siblings weren't that much better. There was no plot and there weren't any high stake that kept me reading. This was another book that I debated multiple times putting down, and I don't even know why I finished it, except for the fact I wondered if they would ever get together because the instant crush but slow burn romance nearly killed me. Y'all can talk about how much you hate insta love. Instant crush, slow burn romance is even worse, alright? I was really hoping I'd like this book because, as you know by now, I love YA contemporary, but I just didn't like it. Alright, and that is it for this wrap-up / mini book review video. Let me know down below some of the books you read recently, or if you've read any of these books, or if we share some opinions on these books, because I would love to know. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I post videos every Thursday, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!